So on the agenda today, I'm going to introduce myself, talk a little bit about MetaGeek, and I'm going to go over some Wi-Fi fundamentals. A lot of our tools do require kind of some basic knowledge of Wi-Fi. We realize to kind of use them and know how to operate with them. So I'm going to kind of establish a very baseline. I'm going to try and go as quickly as possible in that section because I have a lot of ground to cover because MetaGeek has a lot of tools. I'm going to be talking about InSSIDer with MetaGeek Plus. MetaGeek Plus is our current subscription. Basically, it supercharges InSSIDer with really cool features, which I'll demonstrate and show you. This is I'm kind of going kind of sequentially from maybe not that they're basic tools, but kind of the easiest tools to understand down to our more advanced tools. And so after InSSIDer with MetaGeek Plus, I'm going to talk about Channelizer. This is available in our Channelizer Essential bundle. And again, these are all mostly Windows-only applications. And after Channelizer, I'm going to talk about Wi-Fi Air. This is our new kind of mobile offering where it works on mobile devices like iOS and Android devices. But it does a lot of the same things that Channelizer and InSSIDer can do, but on a mobile device. So I'm kind of going to talk about that as well and demonstrate it. And then finally, at the end, I won't spend too much time on it, but at the end, I will talk about IPA, which is kind of a more advanced layer 2 packet analysis tool. That's what the PA stands there. We'll kind of go over some PCAPs. It basically is kind of like a visual version of Wireshark, and it's a little bit more intended for our more advanced users. And then, of course, I will answer any questions we have. And I'll keep an eye on the Q&A as well over here on the right-hand side. So if I see any questions crop up while I'm presenting, I'll try and answer them. Otherwise, I'll just answer them at the end of the webinar. So a little bit about me. My name is Casey. I'm the CX specialist here at MetaGeek. I have a few certifications put on by the CWNP program, which I highly recommend checking out to further your knowledge on Wi-Fi. The CWNA in particular is a really great starting point and will get you, on a good level of understanding Wi-Fi protocol. You can also find me on Twitter at Kathy_Fi. I usually just answer support and things like that for MetaGeek on that Twitter account, but there's also a lot of experts that I follow, knowledgeable Wi-Fi guys on Twitter too. So that's a really good community to check out. A little bit about MetaGeek. We're based in Boise, Idaho here. That's a image from our office downtown. Although we've been working from home lately. Hopefully we'll get back to normal office living here soon. Just to jump right in, kind of talk about just some Wi-Fi fundamentals here. The most important thing to keep in mind is that the FCC allows Wi-Fi to operate currently in 2 bands. A third band is coming here soon, the 6 gigahertz band, but right now it's the 2.4 gigahertz band and the 5 gigahertz band. I won't spend too much time on this because I bet a lot of you guys already know this. Is probably pretty basic stuff for you. But one thing to keep in mind with the 2.4 gigahertz band is that it travels farther, has greater range. It can pierce through walls a little bit easier. The 5 gigahertz band is slowed up a little bit more by walls and concrete and things like that. So it can't go as far. And so it's kind of important when you're designing a Wi-Fi network to most likely you'll want to think about lowering the output power on your 2.4 gigahertz band or turning it off entirely. In 2020, most devices now are 5 gigahertz capable. We're going to see some 6 gigahertz stuff coming out here soon. And so, really only use the 2.4 gigahertz band if you need to, because it's plagued with Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi interference. There's only, 3 non-overlapping channels, which is 1, 6, and 11. You'll hear MetaGeek say that a lot. We're huge proponents of 1, 6, and 11 in the US, at least. In other areas outside the US, I think it's 1, 5, 9, and 13 are the only 4 non-overlapping channels. But in the US, it's 1, 6, and 11. But the 5 gigahertz band, on the other hand, has a lot more room to breathe with 24 non-overlapping channels. So a lot of room down there. A little bit on the standards. Really, the main takeaway from this slide is the modulation scheme here. This DSSS modulation scheme kind of looks like a curve shape, kind of like this on a spectrum analyzer. And if you see this curve shape, then you know that these lower data rates are being used, 11 megabits per second or lower. A lot of beacons and a lot of the management and control frames that fly around in Wi-Fi operate at these lower data rates. And so usually if you see a lot of virtual SSIDs or something, but there's not much Wi-Fi traffic, you'll still see that curve shape in a spectrum analyzer. It's going to be light blue on MetaGeek software, but it'll kind of look like that. OFDM, on the other hand, which stands for orthogonal frequency division multiplex, you don't have to remember that. That's more like a square shape, kind of like this. More like a haystack, we call it a ziggurat, we also call it. If you see more of that kind of square shape, again, this can be up to 20 to 40 to 80 to up to 160 megahertz wide. It can look like this. If you see that, then you know that higher data rates are being used. 54 megabits per second, all the way up to, if you're running 160 megahertz wide channel and you have an 802.11ax or AC access point, you can get up to just about 7 gigabits per second, I believe, is kind of the max data throughput that they have listed for an AX network at 160. So very, very high speeds, and it'll look like that kind of square shape. Just a quick note on Wi-Fi interference. I get a lot of questions about this. Co-channel interference is preferred to adjacent channel, and this is only if you don't have a channel that's free. In the 2.4 gigahertz band, kind of good luck finding a free channel unless you live out in the country or something like that and you don't have neighbors very close to you with Wi-Fi networks of their own. But sharing a channel with your neighbor is much better than sharing an adjacent channel with your neighbor. The reason why is because let's just pretend this is channel 1 here, and there's 3 networks that we can see. Wi-Fi devices on the same channel are much more polite than Wi-Fi devices that are adjacent. It's just kind of baked into the Wi-Fi protocol. They take their turns to talk, and they're very polite and respectful, so to speak. Whereas if they don't share that same channel, they don't quite know that, and they continue to kind of yell over each other as opposed to taking turns. So if you have to, place a channel that shares with the neighbor, it's better to share the same channel. Again, 1, 6, and 11 is always going to be better than these adjacent channels like 4, 5, 7, etc. Just because those are the only 3 non-overlapping channels. It's really important to have a spectrum analyzer. I'm going to be, all of the software that I'm going to be showcasing, except for IPA, will display spectrum analysis in some form. And so it's really important to have a spectrum analyzer. In fact, I have a WiSpy DBX here that I'll be demonstrating. Kind of looks like this. It's just a USB device that plugs into your laptop. You can get these standalone from our catalog, and it works with most of our software except IPA. It's really important to see non-Wi-Fi stuff like microwaves, baby monitors, Xbox controllers, things like that kind of spew RF in the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz band, because Wi-Fi devices think that stuff is a Wi-Fi device and they'll wait their turn to talk. This example is a really great kind of picture of what's going on with spectrum analysis. So this top picture here, this is kind of like InSSIDer Channelizer would show you kind of what Wi-Fi networks are around you, what channel they're on, the signal strength that they're at, for instance. But once you add a WiSpy DBX, that spectrum analyzer, you get a whole other picture of what's going on. So here you can see that there's just some sort of crazy interferer here. This looks like a signal jammer or something like that, honestly, on channel 13. And it's just causing an elevated noise floor pretty much across the entire 2.4 gigahertz band. But any networks on channel 11, maybe even 7 to 11 here, these networks would not be operating well at all. Wi-Fi devices would be disconnecting all the time. So it's really important to have a spectrum analyzer to make sure something like this isn't going on, because you'd be surprised, especially more enterprise environments. Just a quick note on Wi-Fi coverage. We like to shoot for -67 dBm here at MetaGeek. As long as you have that in your household or the environment that you want to have good Wi-Fi, that's a pretty good signal strength to strive for. If you are needing kind of more like video streaming services like Netflix and things like that, then maybe you want like -60 dBm, a higher signal strength. As soon as you start getting lower than that, about -70, -80, that's when your client device is going to start either looking for another access point to roam to, or it's going to start dropping packets if it remains on the same access point. So just kind of good to kind of keep that in mind. And I'll kind of draw this threshold in our software. Our software will display signal strengths of your network and neighboring networks. Pretty much all of our software will do that. And so, yeah, so first thing I want to talk about is InSSIDer. This has kind of been a tool that MetaGeek has put out in a lot of different forms over the years. We had a free version. We took away the free version, made it paid for 20 bucks, and then we took that away, and now it's free again. But now you can kind of supercharge it with different tiers. So again, you can download InSSIDer for free, get some basic Wi-Fi scanning, and I'll kind of demonstrate this a little bit later. Or you can purchase a subscription plan, which supercharges InSSIDer with a lot of cool features. And I believe that these are older prices. It's $100 a year for Plus and $200 for the Pro subscription. Right now, this is half off. So if you go to the website right now, it should automatically apply a 50% Crush Corona 50 discount. I'm not sure how long that'll last for, but at the moment, it currently is 50% off. So now's a really good time to check this out. And I'll kind of go over what these two subscription tiers have to offer here. So if you do have a Plus subscription, we highly recommend that you also grab an Edimax, or, there's actually like 13 adapters that you can grab, but we sell the Edimax AC1750 because it supports 3x3 spatial streams. And it's pretty small. You can see right here, it's a pretty small device. So it fits in a USB hub quite nicely as well. But if you have this device in a MetaGeek Plus subscription, then you start to get client traffic analytics. And I always say this, and I always wonder if customers really understand how cool this is. So I'm going to demonstrate this for you a little bit later, but this image down below kind of also shows some cool stuff. So with this, I can see my iPhone, I can see all the clients on my network, I can see how many packets are they, that they're basically communicating with. I can see the utilization as a percentage. I can see what data rate they're speaking at. This is amazing stuff that, some vendors are starting to kind of include this, like Google Home will have kind of a little interface you can look at, but you don't really get as level of detail as you do with this, because we're actually looking from the client perspective, and we're grabbing all the packets that we can see in an area. So, sure, Google Home will show you your networks, but you can actually look at what your neighbors are doing, because it's all just in the Wi-Fi protocol. Everything has to be visible. And so you can see all the data rates and things like that. And so you get the signal strength. You can track your client device by signal strength if you're not sure where it is or where the device is. This is handy for people in offices, large offices, where they need to kind of track down, the person or the device. Sometimes people leave a device on the network and they forget about it. So this is a great tool for that. Highly recommend checking that out. Also, what's really cool is with the MetaGeek Plus subscription, and again with the Wi-Spy, you still get that spectrum information as well. This can be ordered on our catalog, which is on the footer of metageek.com. You can find our catalog and grab a standalone DBX if you want to add this to your MetaGeek Plus subscription as well. And again, I think it's really important to keep an eye on the spectrum and to know what the spectrum looks like. Not only can you see Wi-Fi utilization, but you can see things like this, right? Sources of interference that might be interrupting Wi-Fi. Kind of a quick note, here's my Kathy Fi network right here. You can also see Wi-Fi utilization on the spectrum with the Wi-Spy DBX and InSSIDer, or with MetaGeek Plus. And that would honestly just look like this, but filled in with red if I were to do a throughput test. And I'll kind of try and demonstrate this for you guys a little bit later. But yeah, this will be filled in. And I see a question here. Pete just said the promo ended on the 30th of June. That was just for the kind of the Pro tools. The subscription should still be 50% off. MetaGeek Plus and MetaGeek Plus Pro should still be 50% off. I believe that's true. But we did end the 50% off promo on the Pro tools, which I'll get to in a second. With MetaGeek Plus, you also get the ability to take snapshots of your network. This is great for MSPs and ISPs, right? Internet service provider technicians who have to come in and kind of take a snapshot of each room in a house or in an office environment and kind of have proof that the coverage was adequate. And this gets sent up to what we call Rampart, which is essentially my.metageek.com. And this is kind of where you can kind of go and look at historical insights. This is kind of what it looks like. This is a little bit older. We're working on the design of this as we speak, constantly kind of adding more data to this. Right now, we actually have clients. Right now, this just shows utilization and signal strength, but we also are going to start including a lot more client traffic information if you do have that packet capture adapter. A little bit on that with the kind of a difference between MetaGeek Plus and MetaGeek Plus Pro, which is kind of the higher level subscription package, is team collaboration is one feature that you have with the Pro. So if you have multiple technicians or multiple partners with you, you really might want to consider Plus Pro and add those seats, and you can kind of collaborate together. You kind of share all that information together. Another reason to choose Plus Pro is you get unlimited snapshots. Since we are using cloud storage, that's kind of the main reason why we charge for the subscriptions, because we use cloud storage. And so Plus Pro subscribers get unlimited snapshots. If you subscribe to MetaGeek Plus, you just get 3 sites and 20 snapshots per site. So it's pretty important if you think you'll be using the snapshots feature quite a bit at multiple locations, you might want to consider the Pro subscription as well. Finally, kind of, there's a lot of other features, but I think this is kind of one of the more important parts. With the Plus Pro subscription, you also get this cool kind of visualization tree is what we call it, packet tree. So you can really see exactly, what's going on the packet layer between a client and the access point. You get the exact count, you get the frame type and how much time they took on the network there. So you get a little bit more kind of packet capture abilities with the Plus Pro subscription. There's a little bit more export to PCAP functionality. You can still export to PCAP even if you have the free version and you don't have a packet capture adapter. You can actually still export all the information we get from just Wi-Fi scanning to a PCAP file, which is pretty cool because free users can download the free version of InSSIDer, and maybe they're experiencing a Wi-Fi issue and they can just send that PCAP file to someone who has a Plus Pro account and open up that PCAP in either InSSIDer or IPA, which I'll talk about later as well. But pretty cool functionality there. And so yeah, with that, I'll go ahead and hop in InSSIDer and kind of show you guys what this looks like. So right off the bat, it's a Wi-Fi scanner, and at the very bottom, it kind of tells you what devices are connected. And so I'm using an internal Wi-Fi adapter. It's a Broadcom adapter for Wi-Fi scanning. So that's what's providing kind of all the Wi-Fi data around me. I also have an Edimax adapter plugged in, very similar to this one that I was showing you. And that's what's kind of performing the packet capture. So that's capturing packets live. And then finally, for the third piece of hardware that it's using, so it's kind of a 3-in-1 tool, I also have a Wi-Fi DBX plugged in. And that's what's providing this colored information here, this blue and red and things like that. And I'll kind of show you a little bit more when that will become very useful. So InSSIDer is using 3 sources of hardware right now and kind of overlaying them across. I have this snapshot sidebar, and I'll show you how to use that in a second. I'm going to kind of minimize it for the moment. But right off the bat, it just basically displays all the networks around me that it sees. My current network is Eye. And so if I were troubleshooting this network, I would just dive into the network details here with the binoculars icon. And I'm going to go ahead and place a star next to it. This is my primary network. This is the one I want to troubleshoot. And this then allows me to start taking snapshots. And so I can actually, name this site, which is, we'll just say Casey's house. And then I'm going to name this room, which is Casey's office. And then just create a site and then take a snapshot. And so it's pretty easy. I just kind of cemented that in time. This was, I'm in my office, and that just kind of saved to my.metageek.com and Rampart. And then I can go back and walk around the entire house and take snapshots and verify coverage and things like that. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of how snapshots work. But let's take a look and see what else InSSIDer is doing here. So it's breaking down my radios here. I have an access point just on the other side of this wall. So that's why it's really kind of close. I see this -60 dBm signal strength and -43 dBm. So you can see that this wall, you can see the difference between the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz radios, and how much just this drywall attenuates the signal between the two, right? So this 2.4 gigahertz radio, this would be accessible, down the street probably. I could probably see this radio. And that kind of goes to show you how far the beacons travel in that sense. But I can dive into each one of these radios, and since I have a packet capture adapter plugged in, I can actually see the clients on each of these radios. This clients column is really helpful. Sometimes if I see more, that I know that I have a couple devices that are 2.4 gigahertz only. So seeing 2 here in the clients column, I know that my network is performing. It's healthy. That's normal. I do have 2 clients that are 2.4 gigahertz only, so I expect to see that. This is really helpful if you're in an office environment and you have 30 access points. This clients column is really helpful to see. Sometimes I've been at a Wi-Fi trek, I think last year, and only one access point had like 100 clients, and all the other access points near it only had maybe 5 or 10 or so. And so it's pretty easy to see there was kind of a huge bottleneck occurring on one access point. And so you could tell, from a Wi-Fi design perspective, maybe they should have lowered the output power on those APs a little bit to kind of share the load a bit more of the clients. And a tool like this will show you that immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and dive into this 5 gigahertz radio that I have that I see some 7 clients on total. And of course, I've aliased them already. I've had a really fun time with this tool, figuring out which client devices were what. And so, I have a Nintendo Switch that's pretty close to me that apparently, it can see, even though it's in sleep mode, it's still pinging the network every once in a while saying, hey, I'm here. You can even see 104 packets since I opened up InSSIDer for this Nintendo Switch. So this is a pretty great software to just quickly kind of see what clients are on your network, how much they're talking. For instance, I have an iPad that I'm about to demonstrate the Wi-Fi Air with right here, and I can dive into it and look at the signal strength of it. And if I were to run like a speed test or something on this iPad, which I'll go ahead and do real quick for you guys, you'll see kind of what the utilization and retry rate over time looks like. And again, this tree P over here, this is available with the Pro subscription, the Plus Pro subscription. So I'm able to see that data tree P get really large because I'm running a throughput test. I'm getting about 168 megabits down. My upload is higher. It's about 200 megs. This is my upload going up right here. Very low retry rate because again, I'm pretty close to the access point. Really, really fun to see that. Also, you can see with the Wi-Fi, I lost my annotation tool. Where did that go? There it is. So also with the Wi-Fi, you can see this activity now starting to form, that OFDMA Wi-Fi activity spectrum right there. So if I run another test, I bet that'll get a little bit more red. You can see it's blue, which means there's still time to talk on this channel. That's the beauty of 80 megahertz wide channels. There's a lot more time and ability to kind of utilize that network before it starts to get overwhelmed, so to speak. But so far it's handling this throughput test quite well. It's all still blue, which means less than 10% utilization. I'll get into that in a second. I don't want to spend too much time on this. We're at 123, but there's a lot of really, really cool stuff here. I could honestly demonstrate this tool for an hour. A really cool thing that I kind of want to showcase is we have this LAN scanning capability as well. So even if I don't have a Wi-Fi device, but I have it maybe Ethernet plugged in, right, which I do. My Apple TV is not on the Wi-Fi, so you can see that I have an IP address here, and there's no access point because it's directly plugged in. I have a few other devices like that as well. You can see that stuff here, which is really, really neat. It does a LAN scan as well, so you get this complete holistic view of your network, both Ethernet and Wi-Fi. A really cool feature is this nearby unassociated clients, and I think this is also locked to the Plus Pro tier. I'm not sure if the Plus subscription has this, but it might. I can see nearby unassociated clients. So if there was a client near me that for any moment in time, yeah, it looks like my iPhone is kind of wildcard pinging apparently. Doesn't appear to be associated to a network. It'll actually be displayed here. And so, there's some random device here. It looks like it's pretty close. It's probably one of my adapters that I have turned off that isn't currently associated to a network, but it's still firing off packets. It's still looking for a network at some point. And so if someone were to walk by my house, for instance, with a client device that clearly doesn't know a Wi-Fi network around here, it would be displayed here. This is great for security concerns for people who run, they need to run a secure network and make sure that there's no one trying to run a man-in-the-middle attack. We actually developed this for a customer who was making sure, I think it was some sort of event, kind of a tech event, and he needed to make sure that no one was sending deauth frames. He was worried that there was an attacker sending deauthentication frames to his network and to everyone's devices to deauthenticate their devices from the Wi-Fi network and authenticate to his network. And so this would capture that. we would be able to see that device because it wouldn't be associated to a network at that point. And it would be trying to send those deauth frames. And so that's kind of where this whole section came from, was from a customer kind of needing a tool to analyze deauthentication frames from an unassociated client. And so that's where this section came from, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff here. Again, if you go to the dashboard of your starred network here in the top left, it gives you these pretty cool kind of configurations. InSSIDer is supposed to be kind of the more basic tool. It's good for non-experts and experts alike. And so, you know, it kind of gives you some things like, hey, good, I'm using channel 11, which appears to be the least crowded channel in the 2.4 gigahertz band. That's great. You know, you can dismiss it. I'm using WPA2 security, which is better than WEP and WPA. You know, it does see a couple things here. This is pretty neat. I really like this configuration mismatch notification, because I do have an access point out in the studio that does not support the same data rates. It's an Apple Express second generation, so it's 802.11a only. And my current Apple Airport Extreme, which is on the other side of the wall here, is a fourth generation 802.11ac. It supports up to 860 megabits per second, maybe even a gigabit per second if I were to deploy a 160 megahertz wide channel. So it recognizes that my access points are utilizing two different data rates, which can cause problems, especially in an office environment. That can cause a lot of roaming issues. Client devices really want access points that have the same or close to same kind of capabilities, so to speak, when they roam from access point to access point. So it's really important to have these types of notifications. And InSSIDer so far has done a great job of figuring that stuff out and telling the user that. So it's a great tool for kind of non-expert users, again, to kind of, you know, make sure their Wi-Fi is healthy, make sure their customers' Wi-Fi is healthy. And I'm going to go into a little bit why you'd want to switch to Channelizer. And I'm going to introduce some interference right now in the 2.4 gigahertz band. I'm using a signal generator here. And I want to show you what it looks like and why a Wi-Fi is very important to have with InSSIDer and a MetaGeek Plus subscription. So right now, I believe I'm going to go back to networks here, and yeah, a lot of networks starting to populate. My time frame that I have here with InSSIDer is the last 2 minutes. You can select 5 and 10 minutes, but I'm selecting 2 minutes because I want to see if it's gone within 2 minutes. I don't want to see it anymore, whether it's a Wi-Fi network or Spectrum or things like that. But you can see as this 2 minutes starts to kind of come nearer to an end here, you can see this spectrum starting to form here, this signature right here on channel 5. This is a significant source of interference. And you'll start to see it knocking out my networks on channel 6. Again, I have 2 minutes selected, so if I saw it within the last 2 minutes, then, you know, it's still going to display it, which is why I can still see this ziggurat here. You know, realistically, that's pretty much gone. My computer is no longer able to see that. InSSIDer's displaying it, again, because I have 2 minutes selected here for my time frame. So what do we do if, you know, let's say this is an intermittent, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And so after 2 minutes, again, this would be gone. Of course, you know, it's very important to see this. If this were a constant source of interference, InSSIDer and a Wi-Fi would see it. What's really cool too is while I'm on it, if you click on channels in InSSIDer and you have a Wi-Fi, you have this RF utilization column, and you can just see that channel 6 and 7 is just, and 5 mostly, is just way overutilized, right? 40% compared to channel 1, which is at 3%. And then we also get Wi-Fi utilization. And again, I could go on and on and on about all the features in this tool, especially if you have a Plus subscription and these 3 pieces of hardware. It's just insane value. I highly recommend, you know, if you're not sure what to purchase, you know, grab a MetaGeek Plus subscription and some of this hardware, and I guarantee you'll be able to have a lot of fun and troubleshoot pretty much any issue from a packet perspective and a spectrum analysis perspective. But let's just say this is an intermittent spectrum interferer here. Maybe you can kind of see it fading, and so maybe after a couple minutes it's gone. You're like, well, what the heck was that? That's kind of where a tool like Channelizer really comes into play. And so with Channelizer, we call this the deep dive into spectrum analysis. This is more for kind of our custom home integrators, automation, home automation users. people who deploy ZigBee, Crestron, kind of any sort of equipment that speaks a lot in the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz band. A lot of non-Wi-Fi stuff will get captured well here. You can actually locate those sources of interference. InSSIDer doesn't have this device finder feature where you can actually kind of figure out where it's coming from, the non-Wi-Fi interference. You can, our Channelizer Essential Bundle comes with a directional antenna that essentially replaces the omnidirectional antenna. This is just a RP SMA connector, so you can actually just remove this. And we do sell the Channelizer Essential Bundle with a directional antenna that kind of helps you directionally locate where the source of interference is coming from. It's a lot like InSSIDer. We also have a Wi-Fi scanner tacked on, so you can still search and find Wi-Fi dead spots. So we, of course, that's very important as well. So it's pretty good there. Again, InSSIDer does a little bit of a better job, but it's still important, and it's still in Channelizer as well. And again, the main value of Channelizer is the ability to pause, rewind, capture that intermittent interference, and figure out what the heck it is. That's really where Channelizer comes into play. Also, for a lot of customers who need to kind of prove to their customer that they did something, Channelizer has a really great report building accessory as well. You can build really nice reports that show what the spectrum looks like in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. You can show all the the Wi-Fi networks and a lot of stuff here. You can pretty much put everything that you see in Channelizer into a nice report, and you can print that off and hand it to your customer. So again, really good for the custom home automation customers like that. They really buy this tool and find it very, very valuable. Also, there's a Cisco Clean Air accessory that you can add on to Channelizer. It helps you troubleshoot Cisco access points remotely. So a lot of people will deploy remote access points and troubleshoot from there. We're at 1:30, so I won't spend too much time on that. Again, it's important because things like microwaves, cordless phones, baby monitors, Wi-Fi devices think that those are Wi-Fi devices, and so they wait their turn to talk, right, until your burrito's finished microwaving. All these client devices are like, oh, that's a Wi-Fi device. Let's let him get on and off the network real quick, and they won't operate, right? So it's really important to have a spectrum analyzer or something like Channelizer to kind of see that. This is what a baby monitor actually looks like, and in Channelizer, this waterfall view is excellent because you can see it hopped from channel 5 to 9, and then from 9 to 1. And so this is really frustrating because if you're a network administrator, maybe you moved your network over to channel 1 to avoid this stuff, and then lo and behold, the baby monitor switches over to channel 1. Very frustrating. Bluetooth is similar in that it frequency hops very quickly across the entire 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. Typically, it doesn't interfere with Wi-Fi unless you have a lot of Bluetooth devices and some large file transfers. These old video cameras used to wreak havoc. These have since been replaced by Wi-Fi cameras like Nest, things like that. And so instead of this unique signature with the spikes, Nest cameras now, Wi-Fi cameras now, they will just look like Wi-Fi signatures now. They'll just be a square shape, 20 megahertz wide, and they'll be on your Wi-Fi network. And so sometimes for those customers, I recommend deploying a separate Wi-Fi network just for the cameras, just to have them separate from the rest of the network that you need to use for your actual Wi-Fi, right? To check your email, have Zoom calls, things like that, because the Nest cameras will eat up a lot of utilization typically. And it's really good to have a Wi-Fi to kind of see what that looks like. And so to show you the differences here, I'm going to go ahead and hop in Channelizer and show you when you might want to consider the Channelizer Essential Bundle. And again, it really goes hand in hand with the MetaGeek Plus subscription because you do get the Wi-Spy DBX hardware, which again goes hand in hand with MetaGeek Plus and InSSIDer as well if you need to do more of that Wi-Fi scanning. Right off the bat, Channelizer starts sweeping the 2.4 gigahertz band. I'm going to switch it to dual band here to sweep both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz band simultaneously. And to toggle between the two, I just click this arrow in the top left corner. And so here you can see my 5 gigahertz band. I don't have any networks overlaid across it because I need to place check marks by it. If I want to place, or if I want to see all the networks around me, I can just hit this master checkbox here. And now I can see all the networks that I can see. This is the 5 gigahertz band. And again, here's my 2.4 gigahertz band. And so again, let's introduce that intermittent source of interference. And I'll show you really where the value of Channelizer starts to come in. This is great, again, for, people who deploy ZigBee, Crestron, things like that, devices that operate in the 2.4 gigahertz band. This is a great tool for that. And you can see immediately right on the top left, you can see that that signature starting to form here. This kind of red streak here. So you know something's happening, and let's just say it's intermittent again. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off and unplug it here, and you'll kind of see exactly where that intermittent interferer stopped, right? It's really, really nice, easy to visualize what's going on here. Another really great thing about Channelizer is you can troubleshoot what it is a little bit too, which is cool. So, you know, like a DVR, you can kind of go back, you can put your time selector around that specific moment in time here, and there it is. It's still recording in the background, which is really, really handy. But maybe we want to figure out what this is. So let's go to the interferers tab, which is to the left of networks table. And this is pretty cool because you can actually click and drag these signatures up to see what it is. Okay, it's clearly not an AV transmitter because it doesn't have those shoulders. You know, is it a cordless phone? It doesn't quite fit. You know, Bluetooth. It's kind of fun to see what these signatures look like. And you can add to this if you discover your own signatures as well. We have a lot of drone users, people who fly drones. And they have really unique signatures in the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz band. Here's what 802.11b activity looks like. You can kind of see a little bit of activity over there on my Cathy network and these other networks, because again, they're beaconing at those lower data rates. So you see the DSSS modulation scheme used. I was hoping a little earlier today, as I was preparing for this, on channel 1, I was seeing some cool OFDM on the 2.4 gigahertz band over here. It seems to have dropped off a little bit. Actually, it looks like right here I might be able to see a little bit of it. Yeah, you can kind of see a little bit of it right here, but we'll go back here and figure out what is this source of interference. It's actually supposed to mimic more of an RFID reader. So maybe you figured out what it is. And let's just say it kind of hops back on here, that intermittent kind of pesky interference, which I see happen all the time, by the way. From a lot of customers say they experience these intermittent kind of spectrum issues. One thing to keep in mind too, while this is interfering, that if you notice my networks table, there's no networks on channel 6 or anywhere in between 1 and 11. All those networks got knocked out by this, and they continue to be knocked out by this. So I'll try not to run this as much as possible in case my neighbors are actually needing to use their Wi-Fi in the 2.4 gigahertz band here. But what's really great is you can locate it. So Channelizer allows you to locate this source of interference with the device finder feature. You basically just select over it, you hit the check mark, and you enter device finder mode and basically play hot or cold with the signal strength. So as I walk away or attenuate the signal a little bit more on this, you're getting farther away from it. As I unattenuate the signal and bring it closer to the Wi-Fi device, you're getting closer to it. So it's really easy to figure out where these sources of interference are coming from, and you can locate them. So let's say we found it, and we figured out what it was. It was a RFID reader that was hidden in the, ceiling, which I've heard before. I've heard of access points that were in the ceiling that people didn't realize were there, and they've used our tools to find. So a lot of interesting use cases, but let's say we figured it out, and now we want to maybe build a report. I won't get into too much detail because we're at about 1:40, and I want to make sure we have some time here. We'll kind of build a report real quick for you to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my session manager here, and I'm going to go back to that original session here of the 2.4 gigahertz band, about right here. I'm just going to quickly show you what you can do with this report. I'm going to add a density graph report, add a networks table report to show that there weren't any networks. And again, this really nice report makes you look very professional. It tells you what the colors mean. And just a quick note on colors, I like to use this time to explain that. Blue means that less than 10% of the spectrum is being utilized. So blue is a lot like a clap. It doesn't interrupt my conversation. I can still talk to you guys. Really, the Wi-Fi can continue to operate just great. Green and yellow, it's starting to get a little bit more heavy, but you can still technically use the Wi-Fi. Red means over 50% of the spectrum is being utilized. So red is like if someone came into my office and started blaring an air horn. I'd have to start yelling for you guys to hear me. And that's kind of what this represents here, this red spike here. It's just an air horn. The Wi-Fi networks are just completely obliterated. They can't talk to each other. Client devices can't hear the access point, and vice versa. And so that's kind of, how we provide in these reports. It makes you look very professional. And then maybe we want to go to where we fix the issue. This is live right now. And by the way, you can add notes by right-clicking. This is really great to kind of do what we call a poor man's site survey. You can right-click here and say where you're at and what you did, right? So Casey's office, removed interference, right? These notes are really helpful for our support team. If you do decide to send in these recordings, then we know where you were at, and we can just look here in the notes at each area that you're at and kind of help troubleshoot the issue a little bit and give you advice based on location. So we can't import a floor plan with this tool or any of MetaGeek's tools, but this is kind of a way to get around and do a site survey by right-clicking on the waterfall and adding notes as you need. But again, let's go back to the report and say that we cleaned it up a little bit. So I'm going to add another density graph that shows the cleaned up spectrum. Actually, let's go in the 2.4 gigahertz band. And there's that activity I was talking about. Someone's using the network on channel 1 here, which is pretty fun. If I go to the interference tab, I can actually see that it's GN activity, pretty nice and neat. So someone's using the Wi-Fi, probably the CenturyLink network, which is pretty fun to see with Spectrum Analyzer. And this would tell me that maybe I shouldn't use channel 1, right? So it's really important to have a Spectrum Analyzer to see that type of stuff, which is pretty cool. And just to finish the report, let's actually add a density graph in the 2.4 and then another networks table. And this will kind of show that there were some more networks kind of operating and speaking in between channels 1 and 11. So that's the gist of Channelizer. Again, it's good for the intermittent interference. The Channelizer Essential Bundle is goes hand in hand with the MetaGeek Plus subscription as well, because you get the Spectrum Analyzer. And the Spectrum Analyzer, I think, is very valuable, very important to have. And anyone who's deploying Wi-Fi, you have to know what the spectrum looks like before you deploy a network or before you assign an access point a channel, because you don't really know how clear a channel is until you have some sort of Spectrum Analyzer. And that's where Channelizer really comes into play. The next tool I want to talk about, and we might go over time here, so I apologize if I go over time here. We're at 1:42. So the next tool I want to talk about, and the reason why I'm talking about it next, is the Wi-Fi Air. And I'm talking about it next because it basically does what I just showed you guys with InSSIDer and Channelizer, but it works on your mobile device with the AirViewer application. And the AirViewer application is available on the App Store or Google Play. And the Wi-Fi Air, I have one right in front of me. It's pretty similar to the Wi-Fi DBX. It looks a little bit different, but this device allows you to actually run similar troubleshooting diagnostics, but on a mobile device. The really cool thing I like the Wi-Fi Air for, and what I've heard from customers, is that they will pull this tool out first because, again, it fits in your pocket. You can clip it to the back of your mobile device and just walk around. You don't have to you don't have to lug around a laptop with it, and it can oftentimes solve the problem that you need to solve before you bust out Channelizer or InSSIDer or IPA, things like that. Now, just to go over some selling points of the Wi-Fi Air, it gives you that real-time network overview. It's a lot like InSSIDer. You get Wi-Fi scanning capabilities, signal strength, things like that. It has a packet capture adapter in it and a Spectrum Analyzer in it. This is really great to show you, again, that interference, so I'll show you what that looks like with this application and this tool. What's really cool is you get a connected client perspective, so you can actually see roaming history of a client, which is really, really neat, especially on mobile. There's not a lot of companies out there making mobile tools like this that'll work on an iPhone or an Android phone or your Samsung phone, things like that. Pretty cool to see a roaming history of a client like that on a mobile device. And now we have snapshots in AirViewer as well. So you can also take snapshots very similar, like I explained in MetaGeek Plus with InSSIDer. You can take snapshots of your customer site. So good for MSPs, ISPs. Again, we call this there when you need it. Very, very great tool. And I'll see if I can demo it here in a second. The competitor with Wi-Fi Air is mostly the NetAlly AirCheck, the G2. That's kind of what I would compare it to. Just kind of a quick little bit on pricing and some differences. The Wi-Fi Air is $7.99 right now. And we did drop the price, by the way, as of today. We realized that there was kind of too high of a price point on it. So now is a good time to buy it if you haven't already. And so we dropped the price to $7.99. The AirCheck G2 is like $2,700 plus the accessories. You're almost looking at $3,000 by the time you're done with it. We've seen a lot of people say that the interface is clunky on it, whereas with that Wi-Fi Air, it's very easy to use. It's your phone, right? You already know how to use your phone, so that's kind of nice. There's not an AX chipset in the G2, whereas we can display AX networks just because it's present in the beacon. And so that's kind of another thing to consider before spending, $3 grand on a device is, make sure you understand it doesn't have an AX chipset in it. You'll have to purchase a updated version once they have AX in there. We regularly update WiSpy Air and the Air Viewer. A lot of customer requests come in, and we constantly work on that product. It's pretty new. We've only had it out for a little over a year, so G2 doesn't have the updates really quite yet. To see nearby clients, you don't have to be associated with the network with WiSpy Air, whereas apparently with the AirCheck, you do have to be associated with the network to see clients, probably because it does some LAN scanning protocol. And then lastly, the AirCheck, it does have Ethernet ports, so you can check Ethernet. Of course, we focus on the Wi-Fi medium here at MetaGeek, so we do not have the RJ45 Ethernet ports. So let me see if I can just show you a quick demo. Again, I'm using the I'm using an iPad actually for this. Let's see if this pulls up here. Okay, perfect. And I see some good questions. I'm going to try and get to those at the end of this. Yeah, some really good questions coming in. I'll try and address those here. So right off the bat, like I said, AirViewer will display all your networks around you. And, my network here is pretty easy. I just hit the card and it highlights it for me there on channel 11. And so if I want to dive into that, I can. And I can see the clients on my network, on my Cathy-Fi network. At this point, my WiSpy Air is basically only scanning 2 channels. Once I dive into a card, the resources are very smartly allocated to these 2 channels because I want to see roaming behavior. And so it's only performing Wi-Fi scanning and packet capture on channels 11 and 42 because those are the only 2 channels that my network operates on that it can see. And so I can, dive into that card. What's really cool is I can see the exact band that I'm on. So this iPad, I know I'm associated with the 5 gigahertz band simply because I see this channel 42 here. So I know I'm on the 5 gigahertz band and this little connected icon. If I were to see that icon here on the 2.4 gigahertz band, I would know that my device seems to be steering to the wrong band. I don't want it to be on the 2.4 gigahertz band. That type of analytic is super valuable to have, and you normally can't get that from Apple or Google or anything like that on your devices. You have to have an external piece of hardware to kind of look at your device, and that is something we pull from the device. So that's pretty neat. Of course, I can see signal strength and all the clients on my network, very similar to InSSIDer with MetaGeek Plus. Now, I would say that MetaGeek Plus with the packet capture adapter is a little bit faster, just to be honest. This is a little bit more slow because we're trying to really cram a lot of resources in one hardware device, right? Again, if a lot of times people will pull this out and figure out what's going on before they need to pull out InSSIDer or Channelizer or IPA or things like that. Again, you can locate devices since it's so portable. I mean, I'm literally, using an iPad and the Air just right here like this. I could walk around so easily, and so it's so comfortable. I actually went on a hike pretty recently for a video that you can find on YouTube on MetaGeek's YouTube channel, and I was able to track down a noise floor just hiking with this. Right, it's so light and easy to use and kind of fun. My favorite part about it, it has all this cool Wi-Fi scanning and kind of packet capture capabilities. I can see all my very similar to InSSIDer. I can see my max data rates, my PHY types, my retry rate on this network and on each client device. But what I really like about it the most, and I won't spend too much time, is the spectrum sniffing capability. So I'm going to actually toggle networks off here to focus more of my resources on the spectrum analyzer. I did get a question about the spectrum capabilities of this device, and it's about on par with the WiSpy DBX. It's pretty much the same spectrum capabilities as the WiSpy DBX. So what you were seeing before, you're going to get here with the AirViewer and WiSpy Air. I'm going to go ahead and introduce that same pesky intermittent interference. You can see how quickly it starts to form, very fast. Pretty obvious something's going on here, right? I don't need a $3,000 spectrum analyzer to know that something's wreaking havoc on channel 5 and 6 here. And as I remove it, you'll see just how quickly things come on and off with the spectrum analyzer. It's even more kind of real time than InSSIDer is. So again, if you do have that intermittent source of interference, you can see it, but you won't be able to kind of capture it unless you take an actual screenshot or something like that. That's when you would want Channelizer. But again, the main selling point for Wi-Fi Air is that it's mobile, really easy to use, there when you need it. A lot of times I'll go to my family's house and that's all I'll bring is a Wi-Fi Air because I already have my phone with me. I don't have to pack up all my Wi-Fi tools and my spectrum analyzers, my adapters, and my laptop. I just need the Wi-Fi Air. So it's a really good complementary device to get with our bundles. And in fact, I think we have a discount now where if you grab the Wi-Fi Air with a bundle, I believe it's discounted further because it does go hand in hand. It does go hand in hand with our Pro Tools bundles like Channelizer Central and IPA, for instance. And again, we do have snapshots now, so very similar to our other tool. I'm not sure if I'm logged in or if it's going to recognize my sites, but if you took snapshots with InSSIDer and MetaGeek Plus, it'll try and recognize that network data. It'll say, oh, I recognize this site, and then you can continue taking snapshots with it. So indeed, it found my house. It knows I'm probably in my office, so I can just take a snapshot of my home office and then upload that to my.metageek.com. So both tools work great to integrate with what we call Rampart or my.metageek.com. And that's a quick bit on Wi-Fi Air. I see a couple questions coming in here. So is the antenna on the Wi-Fi Air the same as the DBX from Jesper? Yes, it's the exact, I could essentially, I'm going to unplug this, which will kill the demo, but this connector here, I'm not sure if you can see it. It's just an RPSMA antenna. You can plug in the directional antenna that comes with Channelizer Central. You can plug in the omnidirectional antenna, functionally the same thing, like 2.4 and 5 gigahertz compatible. So great question. Let's see, I do see some more questions here that looks like I'll answer more at the end here. Okay, yeah, I'll answer some more of these questions at the end here. Looks like Alejandro had a question about the transmit and receive sensitivity. And again, it's all pretty much the same. These two devices, the Wi-Fi Air and the Wi-Fi DBX, pretty much have the exact same spectrum analysis capabilities. The only difference is that there's a Wi-Fi chipset in this. That's kind of why it's a little clunkier because there's a Wi-Fi chipset in here and a packet capture adapter. So there's almost a 3-in-1 kind of chipset in this device. And that's why this is just a raw spectrum analyzer only. This has to be used in conjunction with the internal Wi-Fi adapter built into your laptop in order for this to work. So that's why this is kind of a valuable tool to have because it circumvents the hardware restrictions that Apple and Google place on their mobile devices. And that's Wi-Fi Air. We're at 153. The last tool I want to talk about is kind of a more advanced tool. Again, we're mostly looking at layer 1 with InSSIDer and Channelizer. We're looking at spectrum. Really, if you can't solve the problem with spectrum, whether maybe it's not a spectrum issue, you have no interference and it looks clean with the Wi-Fi Air or Wi-Fi DBX, then you move to the next layer, which is the packet layer. This is really the conversation between the access point and the client, and you can really get a lot of information from the packets or the frames that are being transmitted across. And InSSIDer handles this a little bit, by the way, with the MetaGeek Plus subscription and this adapter like I talked about earlier. But we have another tool that really handles this quite well. There's 3 main types of frame types, and again, you saw this in InSSIDer with the Plus Pro subscription. Management, control, and data frames. Just a quick note on each one. Management frames are all the beacons and probe responses that you see. Every Wi-Fi network says, hey, I'm this network. I support these data rates. You can connect to me. It does that 10 times a millisecond, very, very quickly. It'll send beacons out. And we can capture those beacons, and that's how we were able to display all this cool information about Wi-Fi networks around you and client devices as well. But that's what management frames are. And then we have control frames, which basically control the medium. They're more there to kind of aid in the delivery of the management and data frames. I like to think of these. We have an ACK, which stands for acknowledgement, and block ACK, and RTS, CTS. This is like walkie-talkie stuff. Like when you learn how to use a walkie-talkie, you say over. That's essentially what the RTS and CTS is are you there? Over, right? Here, over, right? And acknowledgement just means that it acknowledged that the packet was sent or tried to be sent. And then of course, data frames are the actual only frames that get sent all the way down the OSI model. This is your actual, YouTube video data, right? If you're on YouTube or Netflix, but this goes all the way down to the wireless medium and all the way back up to the actual server. And we get to see this stuff as well with packet capture tools. Typically, tools like Wireshark kind of had the market. It's a free tool. You can download it right now and look at packets, but it's very heady. It's very engineering. It's really hard to use, in my opinion. It's kind of hard to filter quickly in Wireshark. It's kind of hard to visualize the airtime. You see a ton of packets, and it's just a list of packets, and it's like, okay, what do I do with this? And that's where we designed IPA to really come in and kind of show you visually what's going on in a packet capture. So just a quick explanation of how this works. We use these kind of pie charts. And so this very innermost pie chart is your actual network. So this one, it's kind of hidden a little bit by this block here, but this is your network, right? This was taken at we're in Boise. This is Boise State University campus. The network was called Bronco Guest, and it was taking up, and we could see about half of the airtime. So this is amazing. We could see about half the airtime here was being eaten up by this Bronco Guest network. And then the next layer out is the actual access point. This only had one access point that we could see. And so, we could say this one access point was taking up half the airtime. And then the next layer out is the actual client device. So maybe this was like an Apple device, maybe it was a Google device, who knows? But we can see one client device was taking up a quarter of the airtime on this channel. And we can see this instantly. And then the next layer out is the actual type of frame being sent. So we can see that there was some data. Clearly, maybe they were watching YouTube, streaming Netflix, something like that. Something that was using a lot of data. We're able to infer that almost immediately just by looking at it. And that's where IPA really comes into play. Again, it colors the frames. Data frames are blue, management frames are purple, control frames are orange. And so with that understanding and knowledge, you can really tell what a healthy network is. And I'll show that here in a second. We ship this with the Edimax AC1750, and by this I mean the IP Essential Bundle on our website. Again, it's the same exact adapter that works great with InSSIDer and a MetaGeek Plus subscription. And this is partially why, I think the MetaGeek Complete Bundle goes really hand in hand with the Plus subscription, because you get the hardware. The IPA Essential Bundle portion of it, you get this Edimax adapter for packet capture, and then the Channelizer Essential Bundle, you get the Spectrum Analyzer. And so you get these two pieces of hardware with those bundles, which just go so great with the MetaGeek Plus subscription already. And that's kind of, that's kind of why I wanted to have this webinar, is to kind of illustrate that, all of our tools complement each other quite well. We like this adapter because it's 3x3 spatial stream, so you're going to capture as much as you can. That's currently the most you can get in an external Wi-Fi adapter. They don't make 4x4 adapters that I'm aware of, and so that's the most you'll get. You'll most likely capture most of the data that you need. You can also import PCAPs taken from Mac OS or other sources. A lot of network administrators, kind of higher level people who deploy Wi-Fi networks on a higher level, on an enterprise level, like even K through 12, or a lot of university network admins have access points that can spit out PCAPs, which can then be imported into IPA. So I'll quickly show you kind of what IPA looks like and when you'd want to use it. Then I'll answer some questions. I see some really great questions coming in here. So right off the bat, and again, we're probably going to go over time. So just a heads up, hopefully, I know it's 4th of July weekend, but we're probably going to go about 10 minutes over time just to answer questions at the end. A really cool test PCAP that I like that's available in IPA right now is this virtual SSIDs PCAP. This was sent to me by a customer a while ago. And remember how I said you can see exactly what's going on immediately based on the frame type on the outer rim. This is a great example. There's no blue, there's no data frames, and there's hardly any control frames, which is orange. This is all beacons, right? This customer had virtual SSIDs just set up like crazy, had onboarding, students, staff, VR, a guest SSID, a BYOD SSID, another guest SSID. And all this was doing was just eating up airtime. And you can actually see the airtime on the channel here, just getting eaten up completely by beacon overhead. We call it management overhead. And it's a very real thing. And it's why we don't recommend setting up too many virtual SSIDs. We only recommend 1 or 2 per channel, because this overhead here just gets eaten up. And so if I can actually just kind of hover over and kind of see what's going on here. And sure enough, I can see each SSID here by just hovering over it. And then of course I see the beacon frames at the very end here. This is the access point, the actual client. If there isn't a client, it shows up as a broadcast frame because it's just the access point broadcasting a beacon. So that's kind of how you read this. And immediately I saw this and said, okay, I know what's going on. I didn't even have to dive into it, which I'll show you in a second. You can really dive into some cool stuff. If there's actual, something to look at besides beacons. So here's a good example of me. I was streaming Netflix from my Apple device to an Apple TV. So I took a scan on channel. I think this was like 157. So I'm on channel 157. There was a couple other networks, this Eye management network. If I wanted to quickly filter out that, I can filter the airtime to one point in time here with a couple clicks. And then maybe I want to filter to the MetaGeek SSID. So I just click on that. Maybe I just want to filter down to this one client. This is an Apple device. This was my iPhone that was actually sending the data to the Apple TV. So if I click on this Apple device, within 3 or 4 clicks, I've already filtered down to this device and this conversation with the access point. This is great for network admins who have an issue filtering with Wireshark, because at this point you can actually go to File and you can send it to Wireshark from the file menu, because we realize that these tools all go hand in hand with each other. And now this is a nice filtered, cleaned up list of just that conversation on my Apple device. And I can then go and dive into the flags and things like that. So if you find yourself parsing a lot of PCAP files as part of your job, a lot of network administrators do this. This tool is excellent for quickly filtering and visualizing and figuring out what you need to do, and then send it to Wireshark. That seems to be more of the use case for this tool. I also really recommend this tool if you want to learn more about the packet layer. It's definitely meant for more advanced users who understand packets, but we try and boil the data down a little bit for non-experts as well, as much as we can, because this stuff does get really complicated. For instance, we can see that this Apple device that I just filtered down to, I was using mostly 173 megabits per second. That's pretty good. I did have a 3% retry rate, so something was going on. IPA will see that type of stuff, and in the Analyze tab, it'll actually kind of give you some advice on what to do if you're not sure what to do. And so we did see a high retry rate with that Apple device. Actually, it looks like a different Apple device was retrying about 33% of the time on this. And so you can actually just click Learn More on our suggested solutions. And we're trying to bake more and more of these insights into this tool so that you kind of know what to do. But again, this is the IPA software. It's definitely kind of like a visual version of Wireshark, good for filtering down and identifying the root cause of an issue. This is good for if your client devices have dropout issues and you know that interference isn't an issue. Sometimes, some chipsets aren't compatible with some vendors, like Apple and Cisco used to have kind of this really bad issue that, you had to dive into the packet layer to really see what was going on, and it was just a chipset issue. Faulty chipsets, you have to dive into the packet layer to troubleshoot that. Otherwise, you really don't know what's going on. So this is a great tool for those types of use cases. And just a quick note on our bundles right now. Actually, if you use the discount code webinar, you get 10% off of this stuff right now just for joining. I appreciate you guys joining this webinar. So use webinar, all caps, at checkout. You get 10% off if you decide to purchase anything. But just a quick note, we have the Wi-Fi Air here, but the MetaGeek Complete bundle, this is just the Channelizer Essential bundle plus the IPA Essential bundle. It's just a combination. You save a little bit more money if you purchase it all together. Again, we lowered the prices since our sale because we realized there's kind of this demand for a lower price. So there's a little bit more lower pricing for you guys. We also have Tamograph Pro, which you can add on as well. This is made by a company called Tamosoft, so we can't extend the discount to this software, but this is a site survey tool where you can actually import a floor plan and do predictive heat mapping. You can kind of see right here, this is heat maps from access points to show you coverage in your floor plan. So good if you have a floor plan. You might want to consider a site survey tool, and the cost of entry into that market is typically higher than our tools, which is more post-deployment verification tools. One thing to keep in mind too is that if you add any of these bundles to your cart, there's a round out your toolkit section kind of at the bottom. And this is where you can also add in a Plus Pro subscription if you want. And this should actually be $100 at checkout. since it's still 50% off. And you can also add Tamograph if you want to. You don't need to, if you're purchasing Channelizer, you don't need the report builder accessory just because it comes already with the report builder accessory. But we do have that standalone in case you have an older license that doesn't have it. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of make a note of that. And again, use the discount code webinar at checkout to take 10% off. I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions here. I'm just going to start at the top, which may go back in time a little bit. David asks, what is CX? CX just means customer experience. And so if you send a support ticket to support@metageek.com, I will most likely be the guy to answer it. Let's see, David, does DBX display actual spectrum bandwidth of Wi-Fi signals, or is the haystack in the chart generic? So the DBX, you're probably looking at InSSIDer, David. The DBX is only providing spectrum information. It's a raw spectrum analyzer. The haystack shapes and the network shapes, that comes from your internal Wi-Fi adapter. I'm gonna pull up InSSIDer here, just because I bet there's some more questions about this stuff in general. Mike had a question, how are your USB devices working with newer MacBooks running VMware? Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm running on a Mac right now myself, but I'm booted directly into Windows. If you do have a Mac, I recommend using Boot Camp to install Windows so you have the option to boot directly into it, which is why I'm able to use the Broadcom adapter down here at the bottom for Wi-Fi scanning. And this is also what's providing the little haystack shapes here. Everything else, the color here is being provided by the WiSpy DBX since it's a raw spectrum analyzer. In terms of VM software, you would have to get not only one of these, but maybe two of these so that you could have one dedicated to Wi-Fi scanning and another one dedicated to packet capture adapter if you have a MetaGeek Plus subscription. Just because VM software, it's not able to use the internal Wi-Fi adapter since that adapter is being used on the Mac side. You have to purchase an external Wi-Fi adapter, like even just get two Etamax adapters. They're like 30 or 40 bucks. It's a really good question. Anonymous attendee, so snapshots take a picture of a particular room. There isn't a heat mapping function or ability to collect captures from different areas of the room. Yeah, so with snapshots, you just walk around to each area and it's just going to send up all the information we can get, which is signal strength of your network. We do get a couple of neighboring networks if it's interfering with your network. We're starting to send up client information, so how many clients are on each access point, and things like that. But yeah, there's no ability to import a floor plan. So that's a really good question. The floor plan is definitely more for Tamograph or Ekahau or VisiWave or good site survey tools to consider if you need to have that floor plan capability. David asked, what is HT as in HT capabilities? That's a really great question. That means high throughput. And so if you go to dashboard here, I'm not sure if this is where you saw it maybe, or actually it's probably when I was in my network here. That just means that I'm using, I think high throughput was after, I think 802.11n and later started using high throughput modulation schemes, which just increase the data rate. And so even if I go to my iPhone here, we should probably see some VHT, which just means high throughput or very high throughput. The engineering crowd was very creative when they were coming up with acronyms. Let's see, David was talking about the difference when I turn off the SIGGEN. Yeah, it takes a minute in InSSIDer to show up, but I think at the end of that, it did show up there. Let's see here. Okay, is there a recording of this webinar? Paul asked, yes, this webinar is being recorded and it will be sent out to you guys tomorrow automatically. So great question. Mike asked, packet capture is Mac, but other tools are Windows only. Yeah, packet capture has been a interesting thing in the market. Typically on Windows, it's been impossible unless you had a specific adapter. It's called the Air P.A. Then you're able to take monitor mode packet capture, true packet capture. Now we overwrite drivers across these standard Wi-Fi adapters. And that's how we're able to get packet capture, is by overwriting packet capture drivers across it. And that's how we're able to get live packet capture in Windows, which is otherwise a very tricky, difficult thing to do. Of course, MacBook Pros make it pretty easy. Actually, it's not easy to do it, but there's software that makes it easy to do it to obtain a PCAP, which you can then also import into IPA or InSSIDer with the Plus Pro subscription. These actually do have the ability to import or open PCAP files, which is pretty cool. I don't know if these are even working, but yeah, I think these were test files that I had. But this is pretty cool. If you have customers that are having Wi-Fi issues, you can actually go and find some find some issues just based on the PCAP. So pretty neat right there as well to be able to open up packet capture files. Tom, let's see. Tom had a question. Trying unsuccessfully to pair Wi-Fi mesh extender. InSSIDer Plus still shows the device active long after it's back in the box. What can Plus do to help me? So yeah, InSSIDer does have the tendency to kind of display Wi-Fi networks. I'm going to exit out and go back in since that PCAP was incompatible. We do have this, it's funny because we have some customers that want to see the data forever. They don't want it to ever go away because they want to know where a network used to be. And we've kind of come to a good middle ground, in my opinion, where if it's like 5 minutes or so, it should disappear, especially what you have selected here in the time frame. I would select a 2-minute time frame, which is the lowest time frame as possible, which means if I changed my channel from 11 to 6, it would be 2 minutes before that change would be reflected in InSSIDer. If you experience other issues, let me know, Tom. Send a support ticket to support@metageek.com, and we can take a closer look at that. Some of the mesh stuff is very interesting. The way that mesh works is a little bit different than typical extenders or things like that. I have essentially a mesh network way out in the Studio 2.4, and it acts a little bit differently than current mesh systems, especially Eero. Eero kind of does some funky stuff on the back end with its mesh extenders. So if you can export a PCAP, that would actually be great. And that kind of goes for everyone. If you have InSSIDer with the MetaGeek Plus subscription, and you can just go to File and then save recent to PCAP, that's a really easy way for us to figure out what's going on with your network. If something doesn't look right, save it as a PCAP, and then send that PCAP over to us. Right now, once you save it, it actually opens it up immediately in IPA, which is pretty cool because you can troubleshoot that PCAP here in IPA. But as a support team, we can take a look at that and see what's going on. So send us over a PCAP if you have some issues with that. I'm just going to drag this over here so you guys can see my questions. P2, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but you have a Wi-Spy 2.4X and Channelizer 4. Can I buy the new Channelizer software without buying a new Wi-Spy? Yes. At the very bottom of MetaGeek.com, you can actually find our catalog, and that's where you can get individual items kind of broken apart. Again, it's just MetaGeek.com, scroll to the very bottom, and you'll see catalog, and you can just add a standalone copy of the Channelizer software. So really good question. I think I answered this one live. Thank you, Jesper, no problem. Predictive tool. So Kevin had a question about a predictive tool to know where to place access points, and I think I answered that as well. And so that's, again, a tool like Tamagraph, which you should be able to grab from our website as well if you want to purchase it through us. We do resell Tamagraph, which is a dedicated site survey tool. The webinar discount, I imagine this will be available for a week, Kevin. You asked about how long that'll last. I bet about a week, maybe 2 weeks. We're pretty generous with that. So no worries there. And if you want, request a quote. If you just request a quote to support@metageek.com, we can make sure that we have that 10% locked in there on the quote for you. Some adapters are recommended over others because of spatial streams. Yeah, so Jesper had a question about the adapters on our website. Basically, some are recommended more than others. Like this one, it's 3x3 and it's smaller. We have some that have probably higher antenna sensitivity. There's one that looks like a spider, kind of looks like that Nighthawk router if you guys are familiar with Netgear. And that one can see signals from down the street. I mean, when I plug that thing in, I can see my entire, like almost a mile away from me, I can see all the networks around me. The only problem is it's really big. It's quite large. So we like this one because it fits nicely in a USB hub, and it's not too big and it's still pretty powerful. But you can get whatever you want. I think there's like 13 or 14 adapters you can find on our website that support packet capture. Yeah, great question. Kevin, is there any type of support to help us once we purchase these products? Yes, I mean, that's, our passion here at MetaGeek is educating people about Wi-Fi. That's personally kind of my passion. And so, yeah, once you purchase a Plus subscription, you're kind of in a higher level tier of support, and those tickets kind of enter our support system at a higher tier. And you're always welcome to call our office line as well. We have an open office line. We have 3 or 4 agents that are usually regularly picking it up. Sometimes we're in meetings and things like that during the day, but if you get a hold of us and want to block out some time, we can typically block out time in our schedule for an actual job site, and we'd be happy to help you. So yeah, support isn't an issue there. So good question. Okay, so that's all for the Q&A. I'm just going to look at the chat real quick and see what we got going on here. I'm going to start from the bottom up. Vic had a question about building roaming history into InSSIDer software. That's a really good question, kind of like how AirViewer does it. I see what you're saying. What we do have, which is pretty cool, we will see roaming events already. So I'm going to actually disassociate my iPhone here and reassociate it to my network. Actually, I'm going to go into airplane mode because sometimes it doesn't actually drop the Wi-Fi network I found. So I'm going to go into airplane mode, come back out of airplane mode, and you can see this association request. If my phone were to roam from another access point to another access point, you'd see a little walking figure. And at that point, you can actually, troubleshoot that roam a little bit. Not only by going to the client details here and seeing the actual, this is pretty cool. I can see the ePOL handshake 1 through 4 here. And you can actually export this information with the save recent to PCAP like I showed you earlier. And then you can analyze that in IPA. And it actually should, here on the actions column, once you dive into the client, I believe it will show you the roaming report. It might not show you which channel it roamed to, which is kind of what's cool about AirViewer. But it should give you some analytics, and then you can then import that into IPA and see exactly what access point and channel it roams to. Really great question though, Vic. I assume we're going to introduce some more roaming analytics in InSSIDer at some point. We're constantly putting more features in this product. What MacBook do you have? Yeah, so Oliver, I'm using a 2018 MacBook Pro with the Touch Bar. So far, I've really enjoyed it. It's been able to handle this. I mean, right now I'm, streaming this video. I'm doing powering 2 external displays. I have a Yeti microphone plugged into it. It's handling all this stuff really quite well. Booting into Windows directly is really working well on it. I've been very happy with it. It seems to work really well. The only problem is it has 4 USB-C ports, so I do have to have a adapter. USB-C adapter, which is kind of the name of the game right now. So it's a great question. Rudolph asks if the DBX3 operates at the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz simultaneously. Yeah, it basically does. In Channelizer, it'll sweep both bands simultaneously. You have to remember that it basically, it sweeps them separately, but it aggregates the data simultaneously. It pretty much is simultaneously, but it takes time to sweep each band. It takes a little more time to sweep the 5 gigahertz band, and then it provides the data. So it sweeps both, takes a little longer to sweep the 5 gigahertz band, and then puts it in a Channelizer or InSSIDer. Let's see here, Andrew. Sounds like you have an interesting use case here, Andrew. You have a mobile food vendor who operates outside your office. They use a portable generator that they have to power their kitchen. Is it possible for this to cause interference? Absolutely. I'll answer that question right now. Industrial equipment, HVAC equipment. In fact, they were doing some construction outside my house here pretty recently, and I could see an elevated 2.4 gigahertz noise floor right here with the Wi-Fi, which, I've seen that stuff really cause a lot of havoc in the 2.4 gigahertz band. Airports, all that type of hustle and activity from airports will cause an elevated 2.4 gigahertz band for sure. So yeah, I mean, power generators are very notorious for spewing 2.4 gigahertz interference, possibly 5 as well. It says you are using Zebra handheld wireless scanners that drop off the Wi-Fi from time to time. So yes, and you asked what product would be best to diagnose this. You could use InSSIDer or Channelizer, but you really want to have this Wi-Fi DBX to troubleshoot that, because that's how you're going to be able to see the interference happening. You might honestly want Channelizer. Channelizer Essential Bundle might be the tool you want, because you can see that intermittent interference. I'm going to plug this in one more time and show you what's probably going on with that generator. Is something like this is probably starting to happen when that generator gets powered on. And I'll let this run for a couple minutes and you'll see what that looks like. It might not be so much of a pointed shape. it might be more of a flat, just wider shape. It might honestly be red across the entire 2.4 gigahertz band like this. And I'll always see a elevated noise floor like this, right? I'll color it in as much as I can, but it'll look like this, just a super high noise floor. And what that means is that your Wi-Fi needs to be even better signal strength in order for it to talk, or for your Wi-Fi devices to talk on the channel. And so very, very, very real possibility. And the tool that you would need to troubleshoot that is absolutely some sort of spectrum analyzer like WiSpy, which will work with either InSSIDer and a MetaGeek Plus subscription, or the Channelizer Essential Bundle. So great question, Andrew. Okay, I think that's about it. I'm going to go down to the bottom one more time. Yeah, I think that's about it. One more question from Jorge. Let's see, or George. Does that busy blue channel between 9 and 11 mean interference or channel saturation? Yeah, no, that just means channel saturation. So right now, of course, I have this interference plugged in. That's what this red is. And this is probably what that power generator would look like, but a little, not so spiky at the top, but probably more like this base here. And I would have no idea that this is happening if I didn't have a WiSpy DBX plugged in. This would be completely clear as far as I know. Channel 6 would look like a perfectly healthy channel to use or deploy a Wi-Fi network on, which is clearly not the case. I want to remove this again just in case, but that's kind of how you can see how valuable the WiSpy is with InSSIDer and Channelizer. Very important to have a spectrum analyzer like that. Your question was about this blue here. Yeah, this is just my Wi-Fi network saying, hey, I'm here, I support these data rates, you can connect to me. What's really cool is I can actually figure out exactly what's going on there. So I'm just going to go to my 2.4 gigahertz radio. Yep, indeed. My girlfriend, she's out in the studio. I can actually see that she's out on that access point, and that's what's going on there. She's using the Wi-Fi out there, and that's what this light blue is. She's not using it too much, but there's still a few devices on that channel that are operating, and I can see that. And that's a really cool thing that I'm able to get with this packet capture adapter. Again, it's a lot like what, you know, access points can give you right now. Like Google kind of has a little Nest Hub app that you can see all your clients. Eero has a nice little app where you can see all your clients, but you don't get the level of detail that you get when you're from the client perspective and you're wirelessly capturing packets in monitor mode, which is what this adapter in MetaGeek Plus does. So yeah, I can actually see what this activity is. Not only I can see, you know, that it's something's happening with the WiSpy, but with the packet capture adapter, I can see what devices are causing that. And it's just my 2 access points in my girlfriend's iPhone. Okay, I think, okay, one more question from Paul. Velop AX Mesh uses Wi-Fi 6. I replaced it Airport Extreme, and it was a lot of work to finally get it working in my 2-story house. Would the WiSpy Air have helped me? Yeah, I mean, the WiSpy Air would have certainly helped you. The WiSpy DBX would have helped you. You know, I think a better tool that would help you is kind of what I was just showing you. The InSSIDer with a MetaGeek Plus subscription, and again, a packet capture adapter. To really see what's going on with those access points and the Wi-Fi 6 stuff. Our tools do support Wi-Fi 6 now. If there's a Wi-Fi 6 network, we will display it and show it. The spectrum analyzer, of course, is just a raw spectrum analyzer, so it's going to see Wi-Fi 6 activity. Really what you'd want to use is something like WiSpy Air, but you really want to check signal strength throughout your house, Paul, just to make sure that you have at least that -67, and I'll kind of draw an imaginary threshold here, -67 dBm threshold throughout the entire household. Of course, I'm looking at a client right now, so to be a little more accurate, I would hop out into this section here, which is displaying my access points. And if I were to walk kind of far away from my access point and get closer to my studio access point, these lines would start to drop and my studio access point would start to raise. And you just want to make sure that you have, again, -67 dBm signal strength throughout your entire household, and you should have reliable Wi-Fi. You probably want to have a WiSpy DBX to make sure your noise floor isn't elevated, to make sure there aren't any power generators or things like that. I've even seen Idaho Power, they use wireless connectivity to send power usage to power meters. And those have been causing a lot of issues with Wi-Fi because they apparently talk very loudly. And that was another customer issue that I had, was that a power meter was sending you know, power information, usage information to their technician, and it was just eating up a lot of data. So yeah, you know, pretty much any one of our tools would have helped you there, Paul. Absolutely. Checking for signal strength, making sure there's not any interference. Okay, and I think that's about it. I know we're way over time. I appreciate you guys staying with me and hanging out this long. I know it's 4th of July weekend, so again, this will be recorded, sent to you guys afterwards. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great 4th of July. Yeah, shoot an email to support@metageek.com. I also recommend checking out community.metageek.com. We have a pretty healthy community going on right now, and a lot of times people will post their Wi-Fi questions to the community, and other customers will actually answer it before MetaGeek agents do. So it's been pretty cool so far. So yep, hope you enjoyed this. I think we have a feedback questionnaire at the end to see if it was helpful. Let us know what you guys want to hear about next time. We plan on having these webinars, I believe, on a monthly cadence. And if there's anything you want to see or hear, let us know. This whole product selection was actually an idea from one of you guys. So we thought, hey, that's a great idea. Why not have a little bit of a product selection webinar and showcase our tools? And as always, yeah, just visit metageek.com for more info. And hope you guys have a really nice 4th of July. Take care.